Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Tonight we begin on the strange history of Area 51. Area 51 is a highly classified United States Air Force U.S.A. facility within the Nevada Test and Training Range in southern Nevada that has long been the subject of speculation, secrecy, and stories of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and alien technology. Located in the remote desert near Groom Lake, Area 51 has become infamous for conspiracy theories, suggesting that it houses alien spacecraft and conducts experiments away from the public eye. While these theories have captured the imagination of the public and pop culture for decades, the real purpose of Area 51 is likely more down to earth, though still shrouded in mystery. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you retuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Alright, let's get into the video. Imagine this, a secret desert base born from Cold War urgency, where engineers built aircraft that flew so high they were invisible to radar. This is Area 51, and for decades, its true purpose was hidden behind layers of classified projects and deliberate misinformation. But what really happened inside those guarded gates? Tonight, we explore the verified history behind America's most mysterious military installation and how it became the center of countless conspiracy theories. Now picture this tension. You're making decisions that could affect millions of lives, but you're operating with incomplete information about your opponent's capabilities. The early Cold War created precisely this scenario for American intelligence agencies. Soviet territory became a black box, heavily fortified airspace where conventional aircraft could unpenetrate without being detected and destroyed. Soviet air defense networks had achieved remarkable sophistication by the early 1950s. Their radar coverage extended across thousands of miles of border territory, interconnected with surface-to-air missile batteries and interceptor aircraft. Any foreign plane crossing into their airspace would trigger immediate response protocols. Pilots flying these missions faced nearly certain death, while each incursion risked escalating into broader military conflict. This intelligence vacuum created strategic vulnerability on an unprecedented scale. Without reliable information about Soviet nuclear capabilities, military deployments, or industrial capacity, Western powers were planning defense strategies based on speculation and fear. The estimates of Soviet bomber and missile production varied wildly, creating what officials called the bomber gap, and later the missile gap, periods where intelligence suggested the Soviets might be pulling ahead in strategic weapons development. The Central Intelligence Agency recognized that traditional espionage methods wouldn't solve this problem. They needed a technological solution that could operate beyond the reach of Soviet defenses. What they envisioned was an aircraft that could fly at altitudes no missile could reach, with cameras capable of capturing detailed imagery from extreme heights. This platform would have to operate in complete secrecy, unknown to both foreign adversaries and the American public. Every aspect of this project demanded innovation. The aircraft would require new materials to withstand the extreme conditions of high-altitude flight. The cameras needed unprecedented resolution to capture useful intelligence from miles above their targets. Pilots would require specialized training and equipment to survive in near-space conditions. Most importantly, the entire development process had to occur in absolute secrecy to prevent the Soviets from developing countermeasures. The pressure to solve this intelligence crisis drove decision-making at the highest levels of government. With nuclear war scenarios being actively planned and practiced, the need for accurate intelligence became a matter of national survival. This sense of urgency would justify extraordinary measures, massive budgets, and the creation of facilities operating outside normal oversight channels. What emerged from this pressure was not just a new aircraft, but a new approach to secret development. The CIA established patterns of concealment and operational security that would define decades of classified projects. They learned how to hide programs within programs, how to compartmentalize information so thoroughly that even most government officials remained unaware of what was being developed. This environment of necessity and secrecy set the foundation for everything that would follow at that remote desert facility. The technological achievements that emerged were born from genuine strategic desperation rather than mere scientific curiosity. Each breakthrough answered a specific intelligence need while creating new questions about how far these capabilities could be pushed. Now consider the physical requirements for such a secret operation. You need complete isolation, consistent good weather for flight testing, and access to existing military infrastructure without drawing attention. The search for this location became a priority mission in itself, conducted with the same secrecy as the aircraft development. A team of specialists evaluated potential sites across the western United States. They needed a dry lake bed for runway construction, mountain barriers for natural concealment, and remote location to prevent accidental observation. The ideal site would appear unremarkable on maps while providing perfect conditions for testing aircraft that could not be seen by the public or foreign intelligence. The selection landed on Groom Lake, Nevada, a dry salt flat surrounded by mountain ranges that created a natural bowl. This location offered more than just isolation. The desert air provided exceptional visibility for photography and observation. The empty airspace allowed for unrestricted flight testing without conflicting with commercial aviation routes. The nearby Nevada test site provided both infrastructure and the perfect cover story. Here is how the concealment worked. The Atomic Energy Commission simply added this patch of desert to their existing Nevada test site maps. They labeled it Area 51, making it appear as just another sector for nuclear testing activities. This bureaucratic maneuver provided legitimate reason for restricted access and security measures. Anyone asking questions would assume they were dealing with radioactive materials, not experimental aircraft. Multiple code names were established to further obscure the facility's true purpose. Officially, it was called the Watertown Strip during development, then later became known as Groom Lake, Dreamland, and Detachment 3. This naming strategy created confusion, even within government agencies, making it difficult to connect reports about activities at the different locations. Construction began with extraordinary speed. Teams worked around the clock to build a functional airbase in months rather than years. They constructed a single runway on the dry lakebed, temporary housing for personnel, and basic maintenance facilities. Everything was designed for utility rather than comfort, with expansion plans already in place for future projects. The security perimeter extended far beyond the physical base. Observation posts were established on surrounding mountaintops to detect any approaching vehicles or aircraft. Patrols monitored the vast empty desert for miles in every direction. The isolation wasn't just geographical. It was actively enforced through rigorous monitoring and rapid response protocols. This remote facility quickly transformed into a self-contained community. Workers lived on site for extended periods with limited contact to the outside world. Everything needed for daily operations had to be brought in through secured supply chains. The base operated like a small town with its own rules, routines, and social structure, all built around maintaining absolute secrecy. The speed of establishment reflected the urgency of the intelligence crisis. Within months of selection, the first aircraft components began arriving for assembly. Test flights commenced almost immediately, taking advantage of the perfect conditions and total privacy. This rapid timeline was unprecedented for a project of this complexity and secrecy. What began as a temporary testing site would become a permanent fixture in America's secret military infrastructure. Each successful project justified further investment in facilities and security. The remote desert location that started with a single runway would eventually contain miles of taxiways, multiple hangars, advanced radar systems, and underground facilities. The creation of this base established patterns that would define decades of classified aerospace development. The methods for concealing activities, compartmentalizing information, and maintaining operational security became standardized procedures. These protocols would be applied to increasingly advanced projects as the Cold War continued to demand new technological solutions. This facility's existence demonstrated how national security priorities could create entire communities and infrastructure completely unknown to the public. The success of this approach would lead to similar secret installations being established for other classified programs, though none would achieve the same level of public fascination and mystery. Now imagine the Cecil during the 1980s, when serial killers used it as their hunting ground. The hotel's transient population and minimal security made it particularly attractive to predators seeking anonymity. Guests came and went without much documentation, paying cash for short stays that required little personal information. This environment offered perfect cover for those who didn't want to be noticed or remembered. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, actually stayed at the Cecil during his killing spree across Los Angeles. He would return to his cheap room after committing brutal murders throughout the city, blending seamlessly into the hotel's atmosphere of transience and disregard. Ramirez occupied a small room where he could rest between attacks, storing clothing and items connected to his crimes. The hotel's lack of security cameras and minimal staff oversight meant his comings and goings attracted no special attention. Several years later, Austrian serial killer Jack Unterweger also stayed at the hotel during his 1991 killing spree. He specifically chose the Cecil for the same reasons Ramirez had the anonymity it provided and the ease of moving unnoticed through its corridors. Unterweger posed as a journalist researching the very crimes he was committing, using his room as a base while targeting sex workers in the surrounding neighborhood. His presence demonstrated how the hotel continued to attract dangerous individuals who understood its operational weaknesses. The hotel's management remained completely unaware they were housing multiple serial killers simultaneously. Over the years, front desk staff processed these men like any other guests, handing over keys without background checks or additional scrutiny. The Cecil's business model prioritized filling rooms over screening occupants, creating conditions where violent criminals could operate with impunity. No special protocols existed to identify potentially dangerous guests unless they caused immediate disturbances. This period represents the Cecil's most dangerous era, when guests faced threats from both inside and outside the building. Beyond the existing patterns of suicide and accidental deaths, visitors now had to worry about predatory individuals living among them. The combination of internal despair and external menace created an environment where violence could erupt at any moment from multiple directions. Regular patrons developed survival instincts about which floors to avoid and which times presented greater risks. The hotel's reputation shifted dramatically during these years, from a place of personal despair to a recognized haven for external danger. Word spread through law enforcement circles and community networks that the Cecil had become a destination for criminal activity. The building's notoriety grew beyond its suicide cluster to include associations with active predation. This transformation marked a new chapter in the hotel's dark legacy, one that would further cement its place in Los Angeles folklore. The Cecil's association with serial killers added a concrete layer of external threat to its existing atmosphere of internal despair. Where before the danger had primarily come from within individuals reaching their breaking points, now there were external actors actively seeking victims. This combination created a perfect storm of danger that made the hotel one of the most perilous places to stay in the entire city. The building's physical and operational flaws made it equally conducive to self-destruction and predatory violence, a dual reputation that would persist for decades. Now picture the pilot's perspective as these missions began. You're flying higher than any human has flown in an aircraft before, watching the curvature of the earth appear beneath you. The sky above turns from blue to black, with stars visible even during daylight hours. Below, entire weather systems move slowly across the landscape, appearing as minor disturbances rather than powerful storms. The U-2's operational altitude placed it in a realm that Soviet defenses couldn't reach. Their radar systems were designed to detect aircraft at conventional flight levels. The thin atmosphere at 70,000 feet caused radar returns to scatter and dissipate before reaching ground stations. This created a temporary window of invisibility that allowed the aircraft to photograph sensitive locations without detection. The camera systems carried incredible capability for their time. They could capture imagery with resolution sufficient to identify objects smaller than a baseball from extreme altitude. Multiple cameras worked simultaneously, some capturing wide area surveillance, while others focused on specific targets with higher magnification. The film itself required special handling to prevent degradation from temperature extremes and radiation exposure. Mission planning involved meticulous calculation of flight paths to maximize coverage of priority targets. Pilots followed predetermined routes that took them over missile installations, military bases, and industrial complexes. Each pass provided new information about Soviet capabilities and intentions. The intelligence gathered during these flights became the foundation for American strategic planning. The imagery analysis process required its own innovations. Photo interpreters developed techniques to extract maximum information from each frame. They could identify aircraft types by their shadows, estimate missile sizes by comparing them to known objects, and track construction progress at military facilities over time. This analysis provided insights that went far beyond simple observation. These missions fundamentally changed the intelligence assessment of Soviet capabilities. The feared bomber gap was revealed to be largely imaginary. Soviet production numbers were significantly lower than worst-case estimates had suggested. This accurate intelligence prevented potentially disastrous policy decisions based on exaggerated threat assessments. Pilots described the experience as profoundly isolating. During missions that could last over 10 hours, they operated in complete radio silence. The only sounds came from the aircraft systems and their own breathing inside the pressure suit. The physical demands were extreme, requiring intense concentration despite fatigue and the physiological effects of high-altitude flight. The success of these operations validated the entire covert approach to intelligence gathering. The massive investment in secrecy, the rushed development timeline, and the operational risks all proved justified by the quality of intelligence obtained. This success would lead to further demands for even more advanced reconnaissance capabilities. The information collected during these flights provided more than just military intelligence. It helped calibrate the actual state of the Cold War balance, giving policymakers factual ground rather than speculation. This accurate assessment potentially prevented escalations that might have occurred based on exaggerated threat perceptions. These missions established patterns that would define aerial reconnaissance for decades. The combination of extreme altitude, advanced imaging technology, and covert operations became the standard approach for gathering strategic intelligence. The lessons learned during this period would directly influence the development of subsequent reconnaissance systems. The temporary advantage provided by these flights created both opportunity and vulnerability. While the intelligence was invaluable, the very success of the program created dependence on a technology that opponents would inevitably counter. This vulnerability would soon become apparent in a dramatic international incident. Now consider this reality. Every technological advantage eventually inspires a countermeasure. The Soviets knew something was violating their airspace, but couldn't determine what type of aircraft flew at such extreme heights. Their radar operators began noting intermittent faint at altitudes previously considered unreachable by aircraft. These ghost signals moved too slowly for missiles, yet too high for conventional planes, creating a mystery that Soviet aerospace engineers worked urgently to solve. Soviet missile development accelerated, specifically to address this unidentified threat. Engineers redesigned surface-to-air systems for higher altitude engagement, improving rocket propulsion and guidance systems. They created larger missiles with more powerful warheads designed to detonate near aircraft rather than requiring direct hits. Radar systems were modified to better track objects in the thin upper atmosphere where traditional radar waves scattered unpredictably. The vulnerability became terrifyingly clear during a mission over central Russia. A U-2 aircraft flying at maximum altitude encountered a newly operational missile battery. Soviet operators managed to track the aircraft long enough to launch multiple interceptors. One missile detonated close enough to damage the aircraft's tail section and destabilize its flight characteristics. The pilot found himself in an uncontrollable descent, the aircraft's delicate structure compromised by the blast. He faced the critical decision of whether to activate the aircraft's self-destruct mechanism or attempt to eject. The destruction system required precious seconds to activate, time he didn't have as the aircraft tumbled toward the ground. He ultimately chose to eject, leaving the mostly intact aircraft to crash separately. Soviet recovery teams reached both wreckage sites with surprising speed. They secured the aircraft's remains, including the sophisticated camera systems that contained film evidence of the mission's photographic targets. The pilot was captured alive, eliminating any possibility of denying the aircraft's purpose or origin. The United States initially attempted to claim it was a weather research aircraft that strayed off course. But this story collapsed when the Soviets produced both the pilot and the reconnaissance equipment. The international consequences were immediate and severe. The incident occurred during a period of tentative diplomatic engagement between the superpowers, embarrassing American leadership and derailing planned negotiations. Soviet leadership used the capture as propaganda, portraying the flight as aggressive espionage rather than defensive intelligence gathering. The psychological advantage shifted temporarily to the Soviets, who now possessed both the technology and the operator. American intelligence agencies faced a fundamental reassessment of their reconnaissance strategy. The assumption of invulnerability through altitude had proven false. Every existing mission profile required reevaluation, and future aircraft development needed to account for the improved Soviet countermeasures. The very success of the U-2 program had created the conditions for its own obsolescence. This incident demonstrated the inevitable pattern of technological competition. Breakthroughs inspire counter-breakthroughs. The temporary advantage gained by extreme altitude flight lasted only until opposing engineers could develop the means to reach that altitude with weapons. This pattern would repeat throughout the Cold War, with each side developing new capabilities that forced the other to respond with improved defenses. The capture also revealed the risks of relying on a single technological solution for critical intelligence needs. The loss of one aircraft compromised years of operational security and created diplomatic fallout. This lesson would influence future program development, leading to more diversified intelligence gathering methods and redundant systems. The era of assuming altitude provided protection had ended. Future aircraft would need to incorporate not just height, but speed, stealth, and electronic countermeasures to survive in increasingly defended airspace. This shift in requirements would lead to even more ambitious designs and more sophisticated technologies developed under even tighter security. Now picture this engineering challenge. You need to build an aircraft that can survive temperatures that would melt conventional aluminum airframes. The U-2's vulnerability taught a harsh lesson altitude alone wasn't enough protection. The new requirement became speed combined with reduced visibility, creating an aircraft that could fly faster than missiles while presenting a smaller radar signature. Lockheed's design team proposed using titanium, a metal most aerospace engineers considered impractical for aircraft construction. Titanium offered remarkable strength-to-weight ratio and could withstand the extreme heat generated by sustained, Mach 3 flight. At those speeds, friction with the atmosphere creates temperatures around 500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to soften aluminum beyond its useful range, but well within titanium's capabilities. The material presented enormous fabrication challenges. Titanium is notoriously difficult to machine, requiring specialized cutting tools that wore out rapidly. It reacts with oxygen when heated, becoming brittle if not properly handled during welding. The manufacturing team had to develop entirely new techniques for working with the metal, inventing processes that didn't exist in conventional aircraft production. Every step of construction required innovation. They discovered that standard drills wouldn't cut titanium effectively, so they developed new drill bits with specific geometry and coatings. Welding demanded argon gas chambers to prevent oxygen contamination during joins. Even painting presented problems since conventional aircraft paints could unadhere properly to titanium surfaces or withstand the operational temperatures. The procurement process itself became an operation in secrecy. Titanium was relatively rare in the Western world, but the Soviet Union happened to be one of the largest producers. Through a network of shell companies and third-party nations, the program actually purchased much of its titanium from the very nation it would be flying over. This ironic supply chain remained secret for decades. The manufacturing environment had to be completely controlled. Titanium sheets required storage in climate-controlled conditions to prevent surface contamination. Assembly areas were kept exceptionally clean, since even ordinary dust could affect the metal's properties during fabrication. Workers underwent special training to handle the material without damaging its structural integrity. The learning curve was steep and expensive. Early production attempts resulted in high rejection rates, as technicians learned how to properly work with the temperamental metal. Each failed component provided valuable lessons, but also delayed progress and increased costs. The trial and error process continued, even as flight testing was scheduled. The engineering team faced constant trade-offs between performance and manufacturability. Some ideal design features had to be modified because they proved impossible to fabricate in titanium with available technology. Other components required completely new approaches that hadn't been attempted in aircraft design before. This material revolution extended beyond the airframe itself. Fasteners, hydraulic fittings, electrical connectors, everything had to be redesigned for high-temperature operation. Standard rubber seals would vaporize at Mach 3 speeds, requiring new sealing technologies. Electrical insulation needed to withstand temperatures that would melt conventional materials. The resulting aircraft represented more than just a new reconnaissance platform. It demonstrated that materials previously considered unsuitable for aviation could be mastered through determined engineering. This breakthrough would eventually influence commercial aerospace and other high-performance industries, though the military applications remained classified for years. The titanium construction created an aircraft that was not only fast, but incredibly durable. The airframe could withstand thermal cycling that would fatigue and crack conventional materials. This durability would prove essential for aircraft that routinely operated at the very edge of their performance envelope. Now imagine an aircraft designed not just for altitude, but for speed that redefined what was considered possible. The A-12 Oxcart could cover distances at a pace that made conventional jet travel seem almost stationary. Its performance parameters read like science fiction, cruising at speeds exceeding 3 times the sound barrier, while operating at altitudes where the atmosphere offered barely enough oxygen to sustain combustion. The aircraft's shape represented a complete departure from traditional aerodynamic design. Its long, slender fuselage blended seamlessly into the wings, creating a single lifting surface that minimized drag while enhancing stability at extreme speeds. The sharp leading edges and inward canted twin tails were not aesthetic choices, but calculated solutions to specific flight characteristics and radar deflection requirements. Every curve and angle served multiple purposes, managing airflow, reducing visibility to radar, and dissipating the tremendous heat generated by air friction. Navigation presented another layer of complexity. At these velocities, conventional navigation methods became useless. The aircraft moved so rapidly that standard gyroscopic systems couldn't track position accurately. Engineers developed entirely new inertial navigation systems that could calculate position based on precise measurements of acceleration and rotation. These systems had to operate flawlessly in an environment of extreme vibration and temperature variation. The cockpit became a specialized pressure vessel within the already specialized aircraft. Ordinary cockpit windows would have shattered from thermal stress at operational temperatures. The solution involved developing quartz glass windows fused to titanium frames using techniques borrowed from the aerospace industry. These windows had to maintain optical clarity while withstanding temperature differentials of hundreds of degrees across their surface. Pilots faced an environment that tested both human and machine limits. The cockpit temperatures remained bearable through sophisticated cooling systems, but the surrounding airframe reached temperatures that would instantly cause severe burns. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. Any system failure at Mach 3 could become catastrophic within seconds. The first flight occurred remarkably soon after the U-2 incident, demonstrating how urgently the intelligence community needed this capability. The compressed development timeline meant that many systems were being tested and refined simultaneously. Each flight provided data that fed back into design improvements, creating a rapid iteration cycle unusual for aircraft development. Test flights operated under even tighter security than the U-2 program. The aircraft's radical appearance made it immediately recognizable as something extraordinary, requiring absolute certainty that no unauthorized observers would see it. Flights were scheduled during periods of minimal commercial air traffic, and only under specific weather conditions that provided visual privacy. The aircraft represented the culmination of Cold War aerospace innovation. It combined advances in material science, propulsion, aerodynamics, and electronics into a single platform that pushed against the known limits of physics. Every system from fuel management to environmental control required completely new approaches rather than incremental improvements. This aircraft's development demonstrated how national security priorities could drive technological progress at an accelerated pace. The solutions developed for these extreme requirements would eventually filter down to commercial aviation and other industries, though often years or decades later. The knowledge gained about high-speed flight, materials behavior at extreme temperatures, and systems integration would influence aerospace engineering for generations. The success of this design validated the entire approach of operating outside conventional development channels. It proved that small, highly skilled teams working with adequate funding and minimal bureaucratic interference could achieve breakthroughs that larger organizations might never attempt. This model would be repeated for subsequent classified programs, though rarely with the same dramatic performance advancements. This aircraft's capabilities remained secret for decades, with its very existence denied by the government that operated it. The few people who knew about its missions understood they were participating in something that redefined the possibilities of flight. The experience of flying this machine would remain one of the most exclusive and extraordinary in aviation history. Now consider how a successful design creates room for improvement. The A-12 proved that Mach 3 flight was achievable, but its operational limitations became apparent during testing. The aircraft carried limited fuel and sensor payload, restricting its mission duration and intelligence gathering capability. These constraints prompted development of an enhanced platform that could deliver more comprehensive reconnaissance coverage. Lockheed engineers began work on what would become the SR-71 Blackbird, expanding the original design while maintaining its revolutionary performance characteristics. The new aircraft featured a longer fuselage that accommodated additional fuel tanks and more sophisticated sensor systems. The crew compartment was redesigned for 2 personnel, a pilot and a reconnaissance systems officer, reflecting the increased complexity of the missions. The distinctive black paint scheme served multiple critical functions beyond its dramatic appearance. This specialized coating contained ferrite particles that helped dissipate radar energy, reducing the aircraft's visibility to detection systems. More importantly, the dark color acted as a thermal radiator, helping manage the extreme heat generated during high-speed flight by radiating excess energy back into the atmosphere. The aircraft's construction accounted for dramatic physical changes during operation. At cruising speed, the entire airframe would expand several inches from thermal expansion. Engineers designed the structure with precisely calculated gaps and loose-fitting parts that would seal perfectly once the aircraft reached operational temperature. This intentional flexibility allowed the airframe to withstand stresses that would destroy conventionally constructed aircraft. Fuel system management presented unique challenges. The tanks were designed to seal during flight, but would often leak when the aircraft was parked on the ground. This was not a design flaw, but an intentional feature. The metal panels expanded under heat to form tight seals that prevented fuel leakage during operation. Ground crews developed procedures to handle these temporary leaks without compromising safety or mission readiness. The SR-71 carried an array of sensors that could collect multiple types of intelligence simultaneously. Advanced cameras provided detailed photographic coverage across wide areas. Electronic intelligence systems monitored communications and radar emissions. Other sensors collected atmospheric data and signals intelligence, creating a comprehensive picture of whatever the aircraft flew over. Mission profiles evolved to take advantage of the aircraft's enhanced capabilities. Flights could now cover multiple targets across vast distances without landing. The extended range allowed missions that circumnavigated entire continents while collecting intelligence on numerous strategic locations. This endurance made the aircraft particularly valuable during international crisis when rapid intelligence updates were critical. The aircraft's performance parameters set records that remain unmatched by any other air-breathing aircraft. Its sustained high-speed capability allowed it to outrun missile threats while maintaining altitude advantages over interceptors. The combination of speed, altitude, and reduced radar signature created an operational envelope that opposing forces found extremely difficult to counter effectively. Operational procedures were refined through experience with the platform. Aerial refueling became standard practice shortly after takeoff, allowing the aircraft to carry maximum sensor payload instead of additional fuel. This technique extended mission duration while maintaining performance characteristics throughout the flight profile. The SR-71 served as America's primary strategic reconnaissance platform for decades, providing intelligence during numerous international crises and conflicts. Its ability to quickly reach trouble spots anywhere in the world made it an invaluable asset for national security decision-makers. The information gathered helped shape foreign policy and military strategy during some of the Cold War's most tense periods. The aircraft's retirement didn't diminish its technological significance. The engineering solutions developed for this platform influenced subsequent aircraft design and aerospace technology. Many of the systems and techniques pioneered during its development found applications in other military and civilian aerospace projects, though often in modified forms adapted to different requirements. The Blackbird remains an enduring symbol of aerospace achievement because it represented what became possible when national necessity drove technological innovation. Its development demonstrated how ambitious goals could be achieved through focused engineering and willingness to challenge conventional limitations. The aircraft's legacy continues to inspire aerospace professionals and enthusiasts who recognize it as a milestone in aviation history. Now picture an aircraft designed to confuse the very systems meant to detect it. The Blackbird's radar signature was minimized through multiple approaches working together. Engineers shaped the aircraft to deflect radar energy away from its source, rather than reflecting it back to detection equipment. They angled surfaces and eliminated right angles that create strong radar returns, crafting a form that slipped through surveillance networks with minimal trace. The engine placement played a crucial role in reducing visibility. Positioning the engines within the wing structure helped shield them from certain radar angles. The inlets were designed to prevent radar waves from traveling down into the engine compressors, which act like perfect radar reflectors. Special screens and baffles redirected and absorbed incoming radar energy before it could reach these sensitive components. Materials science provided another layer of stealth protection. The development team created composite materials that could absorb radar energy rather than reflecting it. These materials converted the radar waves into minute amounts of heat that dissipated harmlessly. The aircraft structure incorporated these radar-absorbent materials in strategic locations where reflections were most likely to occur. The distinctive black paint contained microscopic ferrite particles that helped dissipate radar energy. This coating worked in conjunction with the aircraft's shape and materials to further reduce its detectability. The paint's composition was carefully balanced to provide both radar absorption and thermal management properties essential for high-speed flight. These innovations collectively reduced the aircraft's radar cross-section by approximately 90% compared to conventional aircraft of similar size. This reduction meant that on enemy radar screens, a massive aircraft might appear as a small, fast-moving bird rather than a strategic reconnaissance platform. This ambiguity in detection made effective tracking and interception extremely difficult. Enemy defense systems could sometimes detect the aircraft, but struggled to maintain consistent tracking. The reduced radar return combined with the aircraft's extreme speed created a tracking problem that existing systems weren't designed to handle. Radar operators might glimpse the aircraft briefly before it moved out of effective tracking range or became lost in ground clutter. Even when detection occurred and missiles were launched, the aircraft's performance provided additional protection. Its speed and altitude capabilities meant that most interceptors couldn't reach its flight envelope in time to engage effectively. The combination of reduced detectability and exceptional performance created a layered defense system that proved remarkably effective. These technological breakthroughs established principles that would define stealth aircraft design for decades. The concepts of shaping, absorbent materials, and strategic component placement became foundational to subsequent stealth programs. Many techniques first implemented on this aircraft would be refined and expanded in later designs. The development process required balancing stealth characteristics against other performance requirements. Every design decision involved trade-offs between radar visibility, aerodynamic efficiency, weight, and thermal management. These compromises resulted in an aircraft that excelled in multiple areas rather than optimizing for any single characteristic. The effectiveness of these stealth measures was demonstrated through operational experience. Missions flew over heavily defended territories without successful interception, proving that the combination of speed and reduced visibility created a viable reconnaissance platform. This success validated the investment in developing these innovative technologies. These advances remained classified for years, their full extent unknown even within most military circles. The gradual declassification of information about these technologies would eventually influence commercial aerospace and other industries, though the military applications remained the primary focus for decades. The stealth features represented a shift in how aircraft survivability was achieved. Instead of relying solely on performance or electronic countermeasures, the design incorporated passive protection that worked continuously without crew intervention. This approach would become increasingly important as radar and missile technology continued to advance. The lessons learned from this program would directly influence future aircraft design, creating a new category of vehicles that prioritized low observability alongside traditional performance metrics. This shift in design philosophy would eventually lead to aircraft that could operate in contested airspace with dramatically reduced risk of detection. Now imagine the experience of flying an aircraft that behaves differently than anything else ever built. The SR-71's controls responded with exaggerated sensitivity at high speeds, requiring constant minor adjustments rather than the firm inputs used in conventional jets. Pilots described the sensation as balancing on a razor's edge, where even small mistakes could have catastrophic consequences at these extreme velocities. The cockpit environment resembled a spacecraft more than a traditional aircraft. Every surface was designed for function over comfort, with instruments arranged for maximum visibility and accessibility. The small windows provided limited visibility, making pilots heavily dependent on their instruments rather than visual reference points. This instrument-focused flying became essential when cruising at altitudes where the curvature of the Earth was visible and familiar landmarks disappeared from view. Pilots wore full pressure suits that served as personal life support systems. These suits maintained pressure and oxygen supply if the cabin lost integrity at high altitude. The suits were uncomfortable and restrictive, making simple movements require conscious effort. Pilots underwent extensive training to operate effectively while wearing this equipment, practicing emergency procedures until they became automatic responses. The physiological demands were exceptional, even for experienced military aviators. The acceleration forces during climb-out and the sustained high G turns required peak physical conditioning. The combination of pressure suit confinement, oxygen system operation, and constant instrument monitoring created mental and physical fatigue that accumulated during long missions. Pilots needed exceptional cardiovascular fitness and mental resilience to maintain performance throughout flights that could exceed 6 hours. Navigation required constant attention to multiple systems simultaneously. The aircraft's incredible speed meant that positional errors multiplied rapidly, if not corrected immediately. Pilots used stellar navigation systems alongside advanced inertial guidance, periodically checking their position against known star patterns. This celestial navigation technique connected modern technology with ancient seafaring methods, adapted for Mach 3 flight. The sensory experience was unlike any other form of flying. At cruise speed, the world below appeared to move in slow motion due to the extreme altitude and velocity. The sky above turned black even during daylight hours, with stars visible against the darkness. The only sounds came from the aircraft S-systems and the pilot's own breathing inside the pressure helmet, creating an intense sense of isolation. The aircraft handled completely differently across its speed range. At lower speeds during takeoff and landing, it felt heavy and required careful control. As speed increased, it became more responsive, but also more sensitive to control inputs. The transition to supersonic flight brought noticeable changes in handling, characteristics that pilots had to anticipate and manage. Mission durations tested human endurance limits. 6 hours in the confined cockpit, wearing the pressure suit, and maintaining intense concentration required exceptional discipline. Pilots developed routines to manage physical discomfort and mental fatigue, using scheduled breaks and attention to maintain overall alertness. The isolation was compounded by radio silence requirements during sensitive portions of missions. The landing sequence presented its own unique challenges. After hours at extreme speeds and altitudes, pilots had to slow the aircraft dramatically for approach and landing. The transition from Mach 3 cruise to subsonic speeds required careful energy management and precise control inputs. The aircraft's high landing speed and unusual visibility characteristics made every landing a calculated risk. This flying represented the ultimate achievement for military aviators. Selection for the program required not just exceptional flying skills, but also the right temperament and psychological profile. The combination of technical challenge, physical demand, and strategic importance created an elite group of pilots who operated at the very edge of aerospace capability. Their experiences remain among the most extraordinary in aviation history. Now picture the slow unraveling of decades of secrecy. The government as official silence about Area 51 began to crack in the 1990s as the Cold War ended and historical documents started losing their sensitivity classification. This gradual acknowledgement happened not through dramatic announcements, but through quiet additions to declassification releases and cautious statements from officials responding to increased public curiosity. Former workers who had maintained absolute silence for their entire careers finally began sharing their experiences after retirement. These individuals, now free from security obligations, provided first-hand accounts of developing and testing revolutionary aircraft. Their stories filled in details that documents couldn't capture: the daily routines, the technical challenges, and the personal experiences of working in complete isolation. These testimonies helped transform the base from pure myth into a place where real technological history had occurred. The most significant transparency moment came when the CIA formally declassified documents, specifically addressing the U-2 and A-12 programs. This release included previously top-secret maps showing the base's location, technical specifications of the aircraft, and photographs of early testing operations. The documents confirmed the facility's central role in developing America's high-altitude reconnaissance capability and provided concrete evidence of activities that had been denied for decades. These releases included engineering drawings that showed the precise dimensions and capabilities of the aircraft. Technical manuals revealed the operating parameters and limitations that pilots worked within. Flight logs documented specific missions and testing schedules that demonstrated the intensity of the development programs. This documentation helped separate verified historical facts from the speculation that had filled the information vacuum. The transparency came with carefully maintained boundaries. While acknowledging historical programs, the government continued to protect information about more recent activities. The declassification focused specifically on projects that were decades old and no longer represented current operational capabilities. This selective transparency allowed some historical accounting while maintaining security around ongoing projects. The release process followed established procedures for handling classified information. Documents were reviewed page by page to remove details that might still compromise current operations or reveal methods that remain in use. This meticulous review meant that even declassified documents contained redactions where sensitive information had been removed. The visible, blacked-out sections themselves became evidence of how much still remained protected. Each new document release provided another piece of the historical puzzle, while simultaneously highlighting how much information remained classified. Researchers could now trace the development timeline of specific aircraft and understand the technical challenges overcome by engineers. However, the documentation stopped at a certain point, leaving more recent decades completely undocumented in the public record. The declassification process continues today as programs reach age thresholds where they no longer represent current capabilities. Each release follows extensive review by multiple agencies to ensure that no currently sensitive information becomes public. This slow, methodical approach to transparency reflects the continuing importance of protecting operational secrets while acknowledging historical achievements. The available documentation now provides a substantial factual foundation for understanding Area 51's early history. Researchers can study the engineering innovations, operational methods, and strategic context that shaped the development of these extraordinary aircraft. This verified information creates a baseline against which speculation and conspiracy theories can be evaluated using factual evidence. However, the very process of controlled declassification reinforces that much remains hidden. The careful redactions, the selective releases, and the continued official silence about recent activities all signal that Area 51 continues to serve as a testing ground for projects requiring absolute secrecy. The historical transparency about past operations thus paradoxically highlights the ongoing secrecy surrounding current activities. This measured approach to declassification demonstrates how governments balance historical transparency with ongoing security needs. The slow release of information allows public understanding to grow while protecting methods and capabilities that may still be relevant to national security. This balancing act will likely continue as more recent programs eventually reach the classification age. Now imagine living in a small Nevada town during the 1960s and seeing lights moving in ways that defied conventional explanation. The strange aerial phenomena occurred with regularity near that remote stretch of desert where the government denied anything unusual was happening. These sightings weren't random. They followed patterns that suggested controlled flight, but of something unlike any aircraft the public had ever seen. The secrecy surrounding Area 51 created ideal conditions for speculation to flourish. When people observed unfamiliar lights performing extraordinary maneuvers, they had no official information to explain what they were witnessing. The government's consistent refusal to acknowledge the base's existence meant there was no authorized channel for curious citizens to seek explanations. This information vacuum naturally filled with theories that attempted to make sense of the unexplained phenomena. The testing schedule contributed to the mystery. Many flights occurred during nighttime hours, when the aircraft's unusual appearance became even more dramatic. The combination of darkness and distance transformed sophisticated machinery into mysterious lights moving against the starry desert sky. Witnesses described movements that seemed to defy known physics, sudden changes in direction, incredible acceleration, and the ability to hover or move silently. The remote location attracted individuals already interested in unexplained phenomena. UFO researchers and enthusiasts began monitoring the area around the base, documenting sightings and comparing notes. Their observations built a catalog of unusual activities that seemed to suggest technology far beyond conventional aerospace capabilities. These documented sightings gave credibility to claims that something extraordinary was happening at the facility. Stories began circulating about recovered alien technology being studied and reverse engineered. The extreme secrecy made these claims impossible to disprove, while the demonstrable advances in aircraft technology suggested that something revolutionary was indeed occurring. The correlation between observed capabilities and theoretical extraterrestrial technology created a persuasive narrative for those seeking evidence of non-human intelligence. A government's response patterns inadvertently reinforced these theories. When pressed about unusual sightings, officials would typically neither confirm nor deny, often redirecting to discussions of weather balloons or atmospheric phenomena. This pattern of deflection and misdirection, while intended to protect classified projects, created distrust and suspicion among those seeking straightforward answers. The testing of genuinely revolutionary aircraft provided factual foundation for the speculation. When the U-2 and later the A-12 began flight testing, they represented such dramatic departures from conventional aircraft that even trained pilots sometimes reported them as unidentified flying objects. Their unique shapes, extraordinary performance characteristics, and unusual flight profiles matched many descriptions of alleged UFO sightings from previous years. This convergence of factors created a self-reinforcing cycle of mystery and speculation. Each new sighting added to the body of unexplained phenomena, while the continued secrecy prevented authoritative explanation. The very effectiveness of the security measures made it impossible for the government to counter speculative claims with factual information, even when those claims drifted into increasingly fantastic territory. Area 51 became the geographical center of American UFO mythology because it represented the perfect combination of verified secrecy, documented unusual sightings, and demonstrated technological advancement. The facility's actual achievements in aerospace development provided just enough plausibility to support more extravagant claims about its activities. This blending of fact and speculation created a cultural phenomenon that would eventually far outpace the actual secret programs occurring at the base. Now consider how a single individual's account can reshape public understanding of something that had been developing for decades. Robert Lazar emerged in 1989 with a detailed story that seemed to explain the persistent rumors about Area 51. He claimed to have worked as a physicist reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology at a secret facility near the main base. His description of 9 disc-shaped craft stored in a hidden hangar provided specific details that captured public imagination in a way previous rumors never had. Lazar's technical explanations gave his story credibility among those looking for scientific validation of UFO claims. He described element 115 as the power source for these craft, claiming it enabled gravitational propulsion systems that defied conventional physics. His ability to discuss complex scientific concepts while describing seemingly impossible technology made his claims difficult to dismiss outright. The story spread rapidly through media outlets and attracted attention from around the world. Journalists and investigators soon began examining Lazar's background claims. They discovered his educational credentials couldn't be verified through official channels. The universities he claimed to have attended had no record of his attendance or graduation. His employment history showed gaps and inconsistencies that didn't align with his description of working on highly classified government projects. These discrepancies raised serious questions about his overall credibility. The scientific community examined his technical claims and found fundamental problems with his physics explanations. Experts pointed out that element 115, as it existed on the periodic table at that time, didn't possess the properties Lazar described. His explanations of gravitational propulsion contradicted established physical principles without offering testable alternative theories. Most mainstream scientists dismissed his claims as scientifically implausible regardless of his credentials. Former Area 51 employees came forward to dispute Lazar's description of the facility's operations. They noted inconsistencies in his accounts of security procedures, facility layout, and work protocols. These witnesses, who had actually worked on classified programs, provided contrasting descriptions of how such projects actually functioned. Their testimonies suggested Lazar's account didn't match the reality of how secret military projects operated. The controversy demonstrated how difficult it becomes to establish truth when dealing with topics shrouded in official secrecy. The government's historic pattern of denial and misdirection about Area 51 made factual verification nearly impossible. Supporters of Lazarus' claims argued that the absence of records and the disputes from officials were exactly what would be expected if his story were true. This circular reasoning made the claims essentially unfalsifiable. Despite the credibility issues, Lazar's story achieved lasting cultural impact. It provided a specific narrative that connected Area 51 directly to extraterrestrial technology in the public consciousness. His descriptions of alien spacecraft and anti-gravity propulsion became embedded in popular culture through documentaries, books, and later internet discussions. The story satisfied a public desire for explanations about what be hidden at the secret base. The lasting power of these claims reveals how secrecy can fuel speculation that outpaces factual documentation. When official information remains inaccessible, detailed personal accounts, regardless of their verifiability, can fill the information vacuum. The very absence of authoritative counter-information makes challenging such claims difficult, as any denial can be dismissed as part of the cover-up. This episode demonstrates how individual testimony can outweigh documented evidence in shaping public perception. The dramatic nature of Lazarus' claims and their alignment with existing UFO mythology made them more compelling to many people than dry official statements or scientific debunking. The story's enduring popularity shows how mystery and speculation often prove more appealing than established facts, particularly when those facts remain partially hidden behind classification barriers. The controversy surrounding these claims continues decades later, with supporters and skeptics still debating their validity. This ongoing discussion itself has become part of Area 51's mythology, demonstrating how a single individual's story can achieve lasting significance regardless of its factual basis. The episode represents a case study in how information, or the lack thereof, shapes public understanding of secretly conducted activities.